So welcome everybody to the 10th anniversary of the Gowling Construction Law Forum. My name is Ted Betts. I am the head of our Infrastructure and Construction Industry Sector Group. And we have been doing this Construction Law Forum for 10 years now. In 2013, we started with a plan to have regular learning conferences for our clients and contacts in the industry. Our focus has been on providing practical, brief updates on construction laws and practices, current trends, and what's happening and affecting the work that you do in the industry. The target was in-house counsel, consultants, project managers, people who are living and breathing the construction projects day to day and looking to us for some advice. We wanted to give you the chance to learn and talk among ourselves about what's current, what's new, what's coming. The idea was to be very practical, not simply tell you what the law says, not simply regurgitate the latest statute or case law, but to provide helpful information that's practical in real life, for your real life problems on the job day to day. What's hitting you on your desk, what's keeping you up at night, what's directly affecting your construction project and your day to day. To do that, we've always brought in industry experts. So it wasn't just us lawyers talking heads up there. We wanted to give you real life experience, war stories, practical ideas, guides, so that the industry, your jobs, and your companies, and your projects can be more successful. We've covered a lot of territory over the last 10 years. Construction law reforms has obviously been a big part of that, with the Construction Act amendments in 2018 and 2019. Prompt payment, adjudication, a series of changes to holdbacks and lien rights and other parts of the Construction Act in Ontario. And as that reform has been a success in Ontario, going across the country. We've had programs on force majeure, a whole bunch of programs on dealing with many different aspects of the pandemic, including delay claims and health and safety. We've had a number of health and safety programs as well, as the laws have changed, and we are having another important one on December 5, just to flag you. We'll tell you a bit more about that at the end of the program. But with the Supreme Court decision in RV Sudbury, everybody is trying to figure out what is the new law, what do we have to do as owners and employers on projects, and how does that affect our work. We also had a number of programs on fair dealing and the Supreme Court decisions on good faith in construction contracts, in any contracts, and in particular in construction contracts and procurement. Anything that impacts the way that you operate your business or your construction projects, we have tried to address. To celebrate 10 years of our Construction Law Forum, we thought, well, let's do things the same. Let's give you some more of what we've been doing, but a little bit more of it. We wouldn't do anything different. We have a couple of great panels with experts who are living and breathing these topics, and here to not just provide you their thoughts, but also field some questions, hopefully, at the time. The industry is dynamic and changing all the time, and we decided as the best way to honor 10 years of learning in the construction industry was to look at the future. So the theme for today is the future of construction. We have 3 parts to the program. We're going to start by looking at some of the more current trends in more collaborative contract models. Then we're going to move to a panel on environmental, social, and governance policy and ESG reporting, and how different companies are addressing the demands of the public and of companies' boards to answer those kind of questions. And then we'll finish off with another panel discussion on technology and construction, both how technology is changing the way we actually do construction and design, and also what we're doing, what's being built. We're really excited to have the panels and the discussion and the speakers that we have today. We will finish with to celebrate 10 years of this program. For those in Toronto, we will be joining the next room beside us for some cocktails, some drinks and niblets, and some networking, and we'll be sticking around, and you're welcome to ask us questions that we don't get to during the program. On that note, we do have a tight program. We're going to cover a lot, and we do have, I think, about 300 people online watching today. And so we will be fielding questions. If you're online, please type your questions into the chat box and the Q&A, and then we will get to that at some point. For those in the room, please wait till the end of the session, and we will come around with a microphone to ask, to hear your question and try to address it. Just a couple of other footnotes or housekeeping matters. The washrooms are just down the hallway to my left. Feel free to get up. It's a long program until 5 o'clock. We're tightly packed. Feel free to just get up and go, or stretch your legs, or if you have a call to take, we can arrange for quiet rooms for you. But do stick around afterwards for our networking. It'd be great to talk to people. It's been great to be out of the pandemic and actually meeting people in person, hearing them, and being in the same room with them. So welcome. And with that, I will pass it over to my partner in Vancouver, Maya Stano, who will give us a land acknowledgement. I hope you enjoy the program.
Thank you, Ted. So I'm honored to have this opportunity to provide an acknowledgement of the Indigenous peoples and nations on whose traditional lands I live, work, and play. Those lands are now known as Vancouver, British Columbia, but they are the homelands of the Tsleil-Waututh, Musqueam, and Squamish nations. These nations have resided in, cared for, and governed their lands since time immemorial, and continue today to play a vital role in their use and development. Several years ago, I had the opportunity to review an ethnography report being prepared on behalf of one of those three nations, the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. At the time, I lived very close to a park called New Brighton Park, which is located in the northeastern portion of the city of Vancouver. Now, that park was previously covered by a river, and I learned from my readings of the ethnography report that it had had great significance to the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. Unfortunately, while I was reading the report, that river had been filled in and was covered by a tennis court that had seen better days. Now, I share that story with you all today because I'm pleased to report that since that time, the City of Vancouver and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation have significantly advanced their relationship, including by collectively carrying out substantial restoration works to unearth the previously covered river, incorporate cultural recognition signage into the park, and thereby play a role in advancing reconciliation between the municipal and Indigenous governments. So today, I encourage each of you to also consider the Indigenous peoples on whose traditional lands you each live, work, and play on, and acknowledge the influences of such peoples on your lives and experiences. For those of you in Toronto, you are on the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat people. Toronto is also covered by Treaty 13, signed by the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. While I'm unfortunately not able to be there with you all today, I also want to acknowledge that many diverse Indigenous nations and peoples and their traditional and ongoing presence, influence, and rights that they hold to these lands. With that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Natasha Carew, who will lead us into the first session we have for today. Thank you.
All right, try that again. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us in person today. I have the pleasure of introducing my colleagues on the screen, Alexander Pointer, Lillian Campion, and also Matthew Bernardo, who will be presenting for the next 20 minutes or so on the topic of collaborative contract models. Alexander and Lillian are joining us today remotely from our London and Birmingham offices. They practice in our UK-based projects and infrastructure group. Alexander's experience spans defense, nuclear, environmental, energy, aerospace, and highways. She has significant experience managing competitive procurements and implementing collaborative contract models on complex projects. She's acted on nationally significant projects in the highway sector, various cybersecurity and encryption projects, and the procurement of critical services and a fleet of replacement vessels for the UK Ministry of Defence. Today, Ali will inform us about the collaborative contracting model, drawing on her experience with UK government projects. Lillian will be presenting with Ali. She acts for government authorities, developers, contractors, lenders on infrastructure and energy projects in the public and private sectors. She has acted internationally on a major construction and facility management concession in Saudi Arabia, several large-scale solar farms and battery energy storage system projects in Australia and the UK, and also on the procurement and development of 2 greenfield wastewater plants in South Africa. So today, Lil will be drawing on her international experience to deepen our understanding of the alliance-based project delivery model. And finally, Matthew Bernardo is a Toronto-based partner. And prior to joining Gowling's, Matthew was the North American counsel for Acciona. Matthew has a wealth of experience acting on major infrastructure projects under both traditional and alternative delivery models, including transit, industrial facilities, highways, bridges, warehouses, and solar facilities. This past year, Matthew, along with our partner, Mark Platil, have been very busy acting for design builders and project consortia on a number of projects that were delivered under the progressive design build model. So Matthew will tell you more about that model during his presentation. So without further ado, let's delve into the evolving landscape of collaborative contract models. And Ali and Lil, you can take it away.
Thank you very much, Natasha, and good afternoon to everyone in Toronto. It's actually evening here in London, so it's very dark outside. Natasha, can you see our slides, or do I need to share from my side?
Yes, we can see them.
Brilliant, thank you. It's not letting me share from my side, so I was hoping that was going to be the answer. So yes, thank you for the introduction. So Lil and I both work in the UK offices of Gowling WLG in the projects and infrastructure team, as Natasha said. Just to give a bit more background to the sorts of work I do, I primarily act for the public sector, for central government organisations in the UK, not just in construction, but I also do asset acquisition and build projects and services contracts as well. So I was just going to give a general introduction to collaborative contracting and the sorts of things that I've seen in my practice. And then Lil will go on to the exciting stuff, which is alliancing. So collaborative contracting, it's been a bit of a buzzword, I think, globally for a while now. We have seen a lot of the collaborative contracting principles developed through the work that we do, primarily because we are advising on first of a kind or unique and particularly complex projects. And that's particularly the case in the defence sector, which Natasha mentioned I do quite a lot of work in. So there's various models you'll see, contracting models that you'll see used, but it's really the principles that I'm going to talk to today. And starting with the procurement stage and how a project where collaboration is so key is procured. Now, obviously, this will be very country specific. Okay, you can't see your slides, but you can't see our slides yet, but you're working on it. We'll just talk to them. It's fine. At the procurement stage, this is really laying the groundworks for the collaborative contract that you want to have in place, and the sort of contracts I work on are usually quite long term. So it's really important to lay the groundworks for this way of working together from the outset. And it does depend whether you're in a competitive environment or a single source. But really the onus is on flexibility and choosing the procurement procedure that's going to give you the ability to collaborate right from the get-go with bidders and to develop a solution or a requirement that does deliver the contracting authority's aims and objectives. We've seen various approaches taken at the procurement stage that really do help with this collaborative approach. I know you can't see my slides, but one thing we've seen done before is jointly appointed advisors from a technical or financial perspective. This has particularly been the case in the single source environment. This helps to agree a joint baseline that everyone's working to from a pricing and a solutions development perspective. And also around evaluating the maturity of an organization. I think we can share our slides now. Yeah. Hopefully you can see that. Just skip ahead. So around evaluating the maturity of an organization. And this is really how sophisticated a potential supplier, potential contractor is, and how easy it is going to be for a contracting authority to work collaboratively with that organization throughout the contract term. This is particularly important where there's a special purpose vehicle or a joint venture been put together for the delivery of the contract, testing the robustness of policies and the culture of an organization, and really how well those parties can work together in a contract. I'll just talk a bit more about the contract itself. Partnering principles are really important and are embedded into the contract from the get-go. And those are the principles that will sort of govern and set out the way in which the parties will work together throughout the contract term. I won't talk too much about the payment regimes because I know Lil will touch on that when she's discussing alliancing. But target cost plays a big part, and everyone's got some skin in the game there. Another really key element of collaborative contracting is around governance, and I've listed a few elements out there. So the transparency point, no secrets, and setting out upfront the data that is going to be shared between the parties, and that usually is from the supplier to from the contractor to the contracting authority. Exactly what is required and when, and the format that that data is in, so that that's accessible and easily understood by the authority. And then around the management information and the reporting obligations, we've seen increasingly, and I've seen over my career, that these are getting increasingly more detailed and specific. Usually the obligation is on the contractor to self-report, but then that's backed off with audit rights and inspection rights for the authority itself. And the supply of this management information and the transparency plays a big part in the performance regime, and contractors are particularly incentivized to deliver on their reporting and management information obligations. Sometimes you see greater weighting on this transparency and this reporting than you might see on the actual delivery of the core requirements themselves. So key is it to this collaborative working together approach. Then the final point I've got there under governance is around strategic planning. So as I said, a lot of the contracts I advise on are quite long term. So there is an element of horizon scanning and looking forward and assessing what the future may hold for this particular contract, changes in law that are coming down the tracks and the impact of that. And then the last point there on the slide is around focus on remediation and rectification. What we absolutely want to avoid in a collaborative contract is having hair triggers and ending up in a termination scenario. That isn't the point. The point is to get to the root of the problem, solve it, and deal with it, and carry on with the project. So what you'll see is these governance regimes, which are very detailed with various different boards reporting up, they are the first port of call. Any disputes or potential issues are escalated throughout those governance bodies before you get to your formal dispute resolution procedure, adjudication or arbitration or whatever it may be. I'm conscious of the time. Sorry with the hiccup with the slides at the beginning. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Lil now to talk to you about alliancing.
So I started off my career in Australia, where alliancing is quite a big thing at the moment. It's gained some popularity as it's seen as an effective way to achieve value for money in Australia's overheated construction market. And so it really represents a shift from that traditional lowest price wins tendering style. It's gaining a bit of momentum and buzz, as Ellie said, in the UK and in Canada. So we thought it useful to give you a brief introduction here. So let's begin with looking at what is alliancing. So whilst alliancing exists on a spectrum of there being more pure alliances to more diluted alliances, the easiest way to describe alliancing is a cooperative form of contracting where the participants or the parties enter into a relationship, being the alliance, which is set up in a way to align all of the commercial interests of the participants. So each participant in the alliance shares in the success or the failure of the project and shares in the decision-making and the risk management. So you'll see on this slide that the key concept is shared risk. So under more traditional forms of contracting, the risks are typically allocated to an employer or contractor, whereas you'll see in alliancing, the risks are mostly shared. This is intended to align the commercial interests of the participants in the alliance. I'll quickly touch on the key features of alliancing. So the key to alliancing really is this pain share, gain share concept, which it refers to the risk and reward compensation regime that sits within the contract. And so it means that the parties will share in the financial gain of the project's success or in the financial pain of the project's underachievement. Ali touched on the commitment to no disputes, except in limited circumstances, of course. And then this concept around best for project unanimous decision-making processes. So in alliance contracts, if you have a really well-drafted commercial framework, the commercial interests of all the participants are actually aligned so that the best thing for the project is also the best thing for that specific participant. No fault, no blame culture. So that's around accepting joint responsibility and agreeing a solution which is best for a project instead of focusing on assigning blame. Transparency and open book documentation. So Ali also discussed that. And the final one is around the joint management structure. So this will usually include an alliance manager and an alliance board, with the alliance board being made up of representatives from all participants, including the project owner. So the projects that are most suited to alliancing are essentially high value, high risk projects that take place over several years. If you have a project where there's several unknown risks or there's a high likelihood of changes to the scope or the project requirements, alliancing might be a good delivery model to consider. I'll briefly touch on this slide, which looks potentially a bit scary, but essentially I'm just trying to set out what is the commercial framework which underpins an alliance. You'll have the target cost, which Ali mentioned, which is made up of the direct project cost. So that's done on a 100% open book basis. And it means that all the participants are being reimbursed for their direct project costs. And that if the project is late, they'll nearly always have their cost reimbursed. And the other part of the target cost is the non-owner participants fee. So that's the corporate overhead and then a profit margin, which is pre-agreed between the project owner and the non-owner participants. And then the final element of the commercial framework is this crucial gain share, pain share regime. So this relates, as I said above, around rewarding outstanding performance and sharing the pain and the poor performance equally across all participants. And finally, I'll just touch on, based on some of my experiences in alliances, some challenges that I've observed and things to just be aware of when you're implementing an alliance. So a key one is around having sufficiently resourced client owner experience. So alliances require sufficiently capable and skilled project owner teams to deliver the complexity of an alliance delivery model. So not all clients will be sufficiently resourced or experienced in alliancing. So that's something to consider in deciding whether it's the best model for your particular project. Another challenge is the market may not be familiar with it. So that just requires a bit of an education piece in the procurement process. We've touched on the importance of setting a robust TOC, which is particularly important in demonstrating value for money for the project owner. And the final one I'll touch on is just bankability. So it's not, I've said it's not impossible. It just requires a little bit of thought and innovation, given that traditionally financiers will want to transfer the risk of cost overruns, delays, and quality to a creditworthy head contractor via conventional fixed price, fixed time contract. And there's a little bit more uncertainty in alliances, so it's just something to consider. So now I'll pass over to Matthew to discuss progressive design build.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Get sorted out here on the slide deck, is that right? Perfect, thank you. Perfect, thank you, Natasha. Perfect. As stated, I'm here to talk about the progressive design build model. This is a model we're seeing increasingly in Canada over the last 18 months to 24 months. I think as we go through this, I think we've seen this on 3 or 4 Infrastructure Ontario projects now, the Calgary Green Line. There are projects in British Columbia that are looking to be procured under this model at this point in time. Maybe before jumping into a discussion on the model itself, I thought maybe we could just look at the context that we were seeing in the market before and sort of what was driving the move away from sort of more traditionally procured design build finance models before moving here. It really is sort of a move along the risk spectrum that we've seen. Traditional procurement, obviously, you're seeing the bidders incentivized to give a fixed price, time certain contract, based on a fairly short RFP period. There's background information, but you're advancing design, if you're lucky, to 30% at that point in time, and you're taking fixed price, fixed time risk. If you add in financing to that, that's an entirely additional layer of risk on top of that. It had been done successfully, sometimes with losses in the market, on a number of projects over the last decade or so. The model that we were seeing in both sort of Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia was fairly static. There was definitely some room for movement and nuance when we were looking at specific risks, but I think it was starting to be generally known as to the risk allocation between the parties. And then we hit COVID, and the world sort of blew up. There was a real opening of risks, some of which we're still seeing in the market at this point in time. You're still seeing supply chain risk. Third-party risk is significantly higher at this point in time. And all of this where there's a general expectation of bidding a fixed price that bidders have effectively built in a contingency to protect themselves for. We're seeing now, especially in the United States, with a whole bunch of infrastructure dollars hitting the market too, there's a real choice for very experienced contractors to look not just in their home jurisdictions, but to look right across the North American market space. And you're starting to see a lot of contractors looking at the risk allocation that is available to them in those markets, and really taking a risk-adjusted approach to the contracts that they're bidding in. And where there is often more projects than eligible contractors on this, we're starting to see, projects where you're getting 2 bidders where, for the qualification, where instead we used to be seeing 5 competing for that. Sometimes we're down to 1. And in that context, I think there was a real fundamental need and desire to reevaluate the risk, to look at the way that procurements were undergoing, And it just so happened to have an incredibly complicated sort of set of projects in the Ontario pipeline in particular, for which it would be particularly challenging to have this fixed price procurement. So sort of in that context, we ended up seeing a move towards the progressive procurement models. So that's what we'll be talking about today. The idea, and a lot of what we're seeing is a response to the market pressures and to rethinking how risk is being allocated in those projects. A lot of good comes out of it. There's certainly drawbacks both from the procurement side, the procuring authority side, and in the market under those models. But it certainly does address a number of the concerns that we've been seeing in the market. So very quickly, we'll walk through a little introduction of the PD model. We'll look at some of the key features of these contracts. We'll move on, take a look into the benefits, risks, and challenges of the model. And if we have time, I'm on a short leash here. I've got Siri on a 10-minute timer in my pocket, but we can look at some of the market trends we've been seeing as well. It's one of these slides, eh? Okay. So we'll talk quickly about the key model features that we see in a progressive. We'll go on to look at them in a little bit more detail. But really what you see is the early selection of a capable and experienced contractor and a design team during that stage of the contract. They'll then enter into a development phase of the agreement where there's sort of a collaborative design development phase, and that's the owner working very, very closely with owner authority, with the design builder. There's additional due diligence, there can be value engineering, there can be progressive price development and affordability optimization within that phase, and a sort of final allocation of risk once it's all been quantified. What we see in these models is a very high degree of financial openness from the design builder, known as DevCo, during the pricing and price development. That's one of the fundamental protections that you see from the authority side in their ability to make sure that value is derived from the taxpayer. The development phase will then culminate in a committed price schedule proposal at the end of the development phase, and the authority then is faced with a go, no-go decision where they can either proceed with that contractor in the project to move forward to what is effectively a fairly straightforward design build, with the benefit of having dealt with a large number of the risks, hopefully thereby reducing the contingencies that we're seeing. Alternately, the off-ramp that you'll see is the ability to sort of take the design that had been developed to that point in time, go back and reprocure it to the market as a de-risked project at that point in time. So the implementation phase, once we get to that phase, that's after the proposals coming in, it can be on a fixed price basis or sort of an eligible cost plus overhead and profit with a pain share, gain share. In Canada, so far, we're seeing more of the latter than the former, but it certainly can be done both ways and without significant revamping of the model. To get into it a little bit more, the development phase is intended to bring the owner and the design team together to collaboratively develop this project. The owner sometimes, and one of the features of the model is they can continue to develop their specifications, their needs during that development phase, and work collaboratively with the parties to deliver sort of progressive design. There will be ongoing due diligence in that stage of the contract, which really allows the parties, and especially on these long linear projects that we're seeing, to get back out there in the field to test their assumptions on some of the designs and projects. And you can either develop a design solution, you can set baseline risk based on what you know, but the idea is you've got a significantly more advanced design and a greater understanding of the risk before you move on to your pricing phase. The parties will negotiate that final risk allocation. It's generally open at that point in time for what we see, especially site conditions. But during that phase, you're moving forward on a lot of your permitting, which takes a lot of the risk out. You can very often, although not always, have some early works where you're getting some of the utilities or major major project risks done during that phase. This is an interesting rollout here. So anyways, to go back very quickly, the RFP phase, again, is fairly short. You're seeing parties are competing more on their expertise and their plan for the project than a financial sort of bid. To the extent that there is a financial bid in there, you'll either see them bidding on the overhead and profit that they commit to take on the project in the following phases. There wouldn't be generally fixed price pricing at any point during that project. We're seeing in some very recent procurements that they do want to see a best guess pricing from the bidders. We're not sure how much value you'll end up getting where you see pricing at a pre-development stage, but it may help just set expectations in the market and help the price of the project to be communicated amongst the authority sides. We're often also seeing a scored collaborative behavioral assessment where the parties will sort of go in together and be scored on how well they approach a scenario. Again, it certainly encourages everybody to be on their best behavior. The theory is that should continue on to the next round. During the development phase, payment tends to be effectively on a cost plus basis. You've already bid your overhead and profit, so all of that work ends up moving forward on an eligible cost basis. The agreement will sort of say what you can bill for, what you can't bill for, and that's one of the areas of negotiation. Again, we hit the decision point where once you sort of understand the risks better, design, in our experience, has sort of hit 60 to even better 75%. There is that, fixed price, fixed time bid that comes in at that point in time, where the owner has sort of the go, no go decision. If they say go, you've got, again, a fairly straightforward design build contract, which is either entered into or they get a notice to proceed, depending on the paper structure. If you don't, and we've seen this one time in Canada so far, this is on the Dawson's Creek Hospital project, where there had been a development phase completed. The authority there did not like the price that they saw and thought, after quite a bit of discussion, which is a major feature of the market, thought they could do better by going to the open market. And in that case, they went out, had 2 or 3 bidders for that project and ended up with a number significantly lower than we had seen, as we understand, on that bid. So it is a very real price protection for the market and sort of the last credible threat, I think, that the procuring authority has. Moving forward to the payment once we get to the implementation phase. Again, I said you can certainly have the bid and have a fixed price model at the end. What we're seeing more in Ontario is a cost plus with a target price that has a pain share or gain share mechanism where the parties will sort of give their price, and then there will be a tiered sort of sharing of the pain if they go over, or a tiered sharing of the gain. We've seen this recently been developed as part of the proposal, so they'd have to come together, develop the thresholds at which the pain share, gain share comes in. I think the last one that we saw used sort of a Monte Carlo simulation with risk levels. Certainly many ways to deal with it. One trend that we've certainly seen with respect to this target price approach is that the overhead and profit tends to be the extent of the pain share on the project. So, you're not digging in and losing your eligible costs at that point in time. So if you go over, there's certainly still a lot more cushion than you'd see under the fixed price delivery models. On some more recent projects, I think there's even been a pushback on losing the entire overhead and profit. These are generally large, over $1 billion projects. There's a push to keep some proportion of the overhead and profit, whether successfully or not, we'll see. But there does seem to be sort of a push to say at a minimum, there needs to be 3-4% overhead and profit residual at the end of the day, which is certainly not a profitable project, but is certainly a lot better and safer. We'll flip through this. I think we're sharing the slides afterwards, but this is just more the timeline. We've sort of talked about it, where you've got a fairly early selection of the bidders, a very detailed design development phase, and then selection and moving on. We'll talk about very briefly the projects that we've seen that tend to be most suited to these progressive procurements. In our view, the DBF model that we see from the IO of the world is certainly not dead, but the more complex projects tend to be moving towards this progressive procurement model. Anything where there's a challenging design, a lot of interface parties. So particularly on the linear subway projects now, there's so many interfaces to be done. It's almost impossible to have a fixed price that you can commit to when you're relying on 7 different contractors and 3 different permitting authorities as well. Projects where there's a benefit to having a longer term collaborative development a phase rather than sort of a reference concept design and everybody comes in within a very small range of that, where there's sort of an ability and desire to play with the design, build the design, to avoid certain known risks, to improve pricing, to sort of come in within affordability caps as well. Where it's unfeasible commercially, economically to commit to a price schedule type of projects at the 10 to 30% side, or sort of any other projects where you tend to see a requirement to have sort of an innovative or collaborative solution. Again, this is much further down the spectrum than the independent project delivery or alliance models, but certainly there is the option to get quite collaborative, especially within the development phase there. And I think we're running fairly low on time here. The benefits tend to include proactive development, meaningful additional diligence before your pricing, the ability to design around known risks, have value engineering, innovation, and to de-risk the project. The big risk, and especially from the authority side, is the loss of competitive tension. The protections there for the authority or the financial transparency that's sort of built into the model, and their off-ramp to go and tender this project out to other sides. It is a potentially costly design development phase. You're now not having that built into the design bid project. You're working together. It can take quite a lot of additional time and costs. And similar to the alliance model, there is an incredibly large investment in terms of personnel on the authority side. And they certainly have to be ready in terms of the number of people with decision-making authority, and those who have some experience in or are willing to fully buy into the model. So on that note, I will cut it fairly short. The recent market trends, I'll put them up very quickly here, but we're seeing sort of target price mechanisms dominating the market. We're seeing a trend down for liability caps, especially during the development phase. We've seen this being driven especially by the designers who are undertaking the lion's share of the work during that development phase, but the contractors who are sort of the project co's in the model certainly don't want to take on a huge amount of risk for not a lot of gain during that phase as well. And we're seeing a trend towards avoiding a default for a delayed proposal submission. And in a lot of the earlier projects, there can actually be a default event if you don't have a submission date by a specified time, which you include in your RFP. These are very difficult, especially in the more complex projects. So there's a recognition that we all want to get to the proposal and the implementation build phase anyways, so let's just ride that. So on that note, I will turn it over. Thank you. Is that good? Perfect.
Okay. Perfect.
You can just put this in your pocket.
Okay.
Thank you, Lauren.
Maybe I should stand. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Okay, I'll take that. So it has to be on green. Yeah, very good. I'm great. Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Matt, for walking us through progressive design build. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sahil Shore. I'm a partner here at Gowling's, practice construction and infrastructure law. I have the utmost pleasure of hosting and be the moderator for our first panel. I'm going to start from my left, very far left, Jennifer Sues. Jennifer is a general counsel at RioCan here in Toronto. And Jennifer oversees all aspects of RioCan's corporate legal strategy and related execution, governance, ESG, board, and related committee matters. Jennifer started her career at Blake's, was called to the bar in 2003, and has spent time in other in-house roles leading companies in successful execution of the vision. Next to me is Lauren. Lauren graduated with her Master of Science in Sustainability Management from GFT in 2022, and Lauren joined Aecon's sustainability team in 2021, and as a sustainability specialist, has assisted with the development and implementation of Aecon's sustainability strategy. To my right is my partner, Jennifer King, and she is our national co-lead of our firm's administrative law group. She's called to the bar here in Ontario and has a national practice. She also serves as a co-lead of our firm's ESGI advisory services practice and is a member of the firm's climate change and environmental group here in Toronto. So I'm going to start with Jennifer King. I'm going to call her Jen King, and I'm going to call Jennifer Sue's Jen. And Lauren is Lauren. So Jen King, tell us about what is ESG?
Great question. And I just want to see from a show of hands how many people in this room are comfortable with the term ESG. Most people now. So this is very different from a few years ago. Like many other firms, we launched an ESG advisory practice sometime around 2018, 2019, as the term became more used in the field, kind of coming from investing, really. And ESG covers a range of topics that combines to measure how sustainably and ethically a company behaves. That's the general concept. And it provides a way to measure non-financial business risks and opportunities. There's 3 pillars of ESG, as many of you are aware, kind of areas where companies are expected to report on increasingly. The environment, social, that essentially addresses how companies treat different groups of people. There's a recent emphasis on modern slavery, which I think we'll talk about a little bit today, and governance, so how a company polices itself. In Canada, there's an increasing call to put the I in ESG, to have an Indigenous approach to ESG. So this is something for many of you who've been thinking about ESG for the past few years that you might not have heard as much about, but the First Nations Major Project Coalition and other groups are really calling for Canada to think about how we're incorporating Indigenous rights into our ESG frameworks. So not as a risk at the end, not as part of the S, not as a consideration of part of the environmental, but a lot of the frameworks that you talk about and hear about in ESG were developed internationally, where they don't have constitutionally protected rights of Indigenous peoples. So increasingly a call to consider Indigenous rights and their constitutionally protected rights early on. And you see a lot of the voluntary reporting. Increasingly, I see companies that are actually coming out with ESG-I reports, not just ESG. So I think that that's a bit of the future of ESG in Canada, is to really incorporate the I. So how is this all relevant to the construction sector? We're going to hear about this more today, but I'll give you a few stats that you may already be aware of, which is that as of 2022, the stat is that buildings are responsible for 37% of global carbon emissions. 37%. It's very significant. And really, it's carbon and climate change that's really driven ESG, particularly until recently. A good chunk of that is for operations, but a significant part is also for embodied carbon. So in the materials, the extraction and transportation of materials.
And we hear a lot about concrete. So cement is responsible for 7% of all carbon emissions globally. So 65% of construction emissions are from cement. So, and also construction uses 32% of the world's natural resources. So very significant. And there's a recognition around the world that we can't have change or any movement in climate change without the construction sector. We're also seeing a lot of impacts of climate change on the built environment and on the construction industry. Probably don't have to even tell you about this, but about there was a report done in 2021 that said that approximately 45% of construction projects globally are impacted by adverse weather every year. And increasingly, we're seeing insurance claims related to significant weather events. So lots of considerations for ESG in the sector, both to move the needle, in particular in climate change, and then also to consider the risks and opportunities coming out of ESG.
Well, thank you, Jen. And Lauren, moving to you with those stats in mind that Jen King just shared with us. In your view and in your role as a sustainability specialist at AECOM, what role, in your respectful view, does ESG play within your business? And how has it shaped your operations?
Yeah, so there's really two ways in which kind of this momentum towards including ESG in the construction and infrastructure sector has really shaped our operations. The first of which really is to do with our project mix. So we're seeing more and more demand for infrastructure that supports the energy transition. This is aligned with a lot of the Government of Canada's goals. So from our side of things, there's a greater push towards those projects, including renewable energy generation. So this is things like small modular reactors, hydro, cogeneration, geothermal, to the actual energy storage facilities, so battery storage facilities. On the other side of things, we are seeing movement towards a little bit more transparency as well as action around actual ESG integration into our physical operations. A lot of this really is pushed from that awareness of how significant the construction infrastructure sector's impact can be because of the nature of its supply chain, how significant for example, the carbon dioxide emissions associated with everything from material production to the construction phase, even to end use. It really is a very impactful sector. And I think that that's really driving a lot of demand from stakeholders for increased transparency as well as action on behalf of the companies. I think that there's also been a lot of demand for action because as of lately, there's been actually some alternatives available. So we are seeing in the market emerging alternative concrete, for example, that has lower, even net zero emissions associated with it, as well as technology on site. So for example, hydrogen generators, electric generators, different types of solar machinery. So I think that all of those factors coming together have really pushed ESG to the forefront within the industry.
Well, thank you, Lauren. And Jennifer, I'm going to move to you next. You know, we've heard from Lauren with her perspective in the contractor world. RioCan plays a different role within that chain. And how has what role has ESG played in your business? And how have you made it as part of your DNA in terms of operations?
Well, thank you, Sahil, for that excellent question. So RioCan is, as many of you probably know, one of Canada's largest real estate investment trusts. And we have about 200 properties across Canada that are comprised of commercial, predominantly retail, office and residential uses. Beginning about 4 years ago, we took a really hard look at the portfolio, along with all the new regulations that were coming into place. And the role of ESG has really encapsulated the entire organization. So I oversee a department of ESG professionals, but what we've really accomplished is ingraining ESG as part of the ethos of the company right across the board, cross-functionally. So it starts at the board level, where we are a public company, where we have a $6 billion market cap, which was much higher before COVID, but today is $6 billion. And we have a dedicated ESG committee at the board level that is charged with overseeing every element of what we do. On a management level, we have councils and sustainability committees and social and governance experts in many different areas. But the role of our department is to ensure that really it is a seamless approach strategically when we look at assets to own, operate, or develop, that we've incorporated some of these considerations. So lately, we've been very focused on something called science-based targets. Many of you are going to be familiar with that. These are the scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions reduction strategies that we're all going to be rolling out for a net zero 2050 target. Certainly 2050 is probably past when I will still be at RioCan. So we've tried to boil that down to 2030 and something more meaningful in the short term. And because of that, what we've really done, I think very effectively, is embed ESG as part of every single person's approach at RioCan. We've done this in many ways, one of which has been very successful is to incorporate it into both the short and long-term bonus plans. So we have specific ESG targets in those plans, and everything ladders up to the overall ESG strategy. Because we're a public company, we also look at how we incorporate that into the investor relations messaging, and we're very widely held in many jurisdictions. So it's quite a tricky balance because, of course, in Europe, the heightened focus on ESG is at one end of the spectrum. In the US, it's at the complete opposite, and Canada is typically in the middle, although in a difficult economy, there's certainly less of a focus on the social aspects today, with the expectation, I think, that once the economy stabilizes, we will still be expected to have made considerable progress. So it's how to balance all of those things and keep your revenue-enhancing measures in place at the same time at a very high level.
No, thank you, Jennifer. And Jennifer, something that you said and what Jen King said, I'm going to bring back to you, Lauren. And that is in relation to, how our businesses, in particular Aecon, have been impacted by human rights and abuses in supply chain. And Jen King mentioned briefly about the modern slavery risks. Like, how are you taking all of those issues into account in the implementation of the policy?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that has been a global risk, really. But with the release of the Canadian Modern Slavery Act, it is something that many companies in Canada will be subject to reporting on starting in 2024. And really what it has allowed us to do and what it will force many companies to do is to inwardly look and consider human rights risks, both within their operation and within their supply chain. And I think that this is a very valuable tool. It's something that we're going to start seeing more and more requirements around ESG reporting. So this would fall, sort of within that social aspect of the ESG reporting. And it will also increase the dialogue internally within these companies that are required to report. So there's going to be a need for collaboration between a lot of the internal teams. So that'll be internal ESG teams, legal teams, even accounting teams, as often you have to consider what the financial impacts of these risks and opportunities for these ESG topics are going to be. And I think it's really going to set a little bit of precedence as to what the future of more regulated and mandated ESG reporting might look like in terms of how organizations and companies are going to have to look and evaluate how they're going to integrate that into their own risk management and strategy processes.
So Lauren and Jennifer, the question that I have based on what you just both told us is, you're setting up goals and you not only want to achieve those goals, but surpass those goals. But in order for you to achieve those goals, you're dependent on your suppliers. Like, what is the thought process behind who's providing services to RioCan and what their model or policy may look like? Like, how is that considered, if at all?
So it definitely is considered. The good thing is, as a public organization, of course, you always consider the impact reputationally of any supplier. What we've done now is be much more deliberate in rolling out specific codes of conduct for suppliers to adhere to, having training sessions, having more discussions with them, and really tracing back the supply of goods to the very origin to make sure that we've always been on the right side of things, but I think there's such a heightened scrutiny in this day and age that you can't double check too often. So to be honest, we're at the beginning stages, I think, of understanding the scope of this legislation. Right now, it's a reporting requirement, which we have complied with. But in terms of transparency and ongoing reporting and how that filters in to the sustainability report that we do annually and how much meaning it carries with our investor community, that really remains to be seen. There's so many social issues that are resonating around the world right now that you're constantly trying to ascertain what is most meaningful to your stakeholders. And often the legislation's a little bit behind in terms of the time of the day. So, today I think people's thoughts and hearts are perhaps focused on other issues. Not to say the Modern Slavery Act isn't very important. We are dealing with it, but I think it's the kind of thing that will just have to evolve organically in the next few years.
No, thank you, Jennifer. What about you, Lauren? What do you have anything to supplement to what Jennifer said from your perspective?
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something that we're looking at integrating into our existing processes. We do have a process in which we do a supplier screening, whether that be with our existing suppliers or potential suppliers. And it's really kind of showing us how we can start integrating ESG considerations within our supply chain, those types of metrics into how we are actually engaging with our suppliers or potential suppliers, and how that integrates fully with our existing sort of mechanisms for that type of monitoring.
No, thank you, Lauren. Turning to you, Jen King. You set the stage up with the stats, and that's caught my attention. So I'm going to take that a bit further. And one of the things that we often speak about within the ESG context is also the litigation. So are you able to tell people both in person and virtually, what is a litigation risk associated with the ESG policies that our industry may be facing?
Well, I think a lot about litigation risk. So I think a lot about litigation risk. For anyone who's interested in delving deeper into ESG, there's a Osgood Professional Development puts on an ESG climate risk in the law certificate. They've done it for 3 years now. And we really delve into these issues in depth. But perhaps I'll start off with a bit of a review of where we're at on regulation. I think you've heard a little bit already that, and I'm sure that you're aware that there are no mandatory standards. And there's been a proliferation of standards around ESG. There's long lists of different standards. And the question in the past few years has always been, what standard do I apply if I'm voluntarily reporting? We're starting to get to mandatory standards, but we're not there yet. We're increasingly seeing companies issue voluntarily in Canada, voluntary reporting standards. They're a bit more robust when it comes to the environmental impacts and a bit less so generally on the social and governance. But we are seeing legislation. We are seeing some legislation in the area of ESG. I'm going to focus a little bit on some of the things that we're seeing from a climate change perspective. Really, we've been seeing a big focus on reducing embodied carbon in construction. So we're seeing that at the municipal level and at the federal level and at the kind of certificate level. So LEED and the Canada Green Building Council Zero Carbon Building Standards, both their certification programs now already award projects for reductions in embodied carbon. The Toronto Green Standard, the version that came out this year in May, they very proudly set targets, performance targets for embodied carbon, and became the first jurisdiction in North America to enact this. This is only for public construction, not for private construction, but you can see where it's going. We also see Vancouver has set an embodied carbon reduction target for new construction at 40% by 2030. And they're coming up with programs to get there. They don't have them all in place yet. And we saw about a year ago, the federal government, the Treasury Board announced the standard on embodied carbon in construction, which took effect last December, that it essentially sets standards for federal procurements over 10 million or more. They now have standards and reporting requirements that of course trickle down to the vendors. So we're seeing those kinds of policies come into place. What's coming is that we don't have mandatory disclosure yet in Canada, but they're starting. 2024 is going to be a big year for mandatory disclosures. Perhaps not yet for the construction industry, although we'll see impacts of it. In May 2024, there's going to be first annual reports required on forced and child labor due to the Modern Slavery Act. In September 2024, there's going to be requirements for Canada's largest banks in the financial sector for mandatory ESG reporting. Larger, and there's going to be kind of a rollout of that. And public companies won't have much longer to wait, we think, for mandatory disclosure. I'm curious what Jennifer thinks about this, because the Canadian Securities Administrator has long had a national instrument that was published, it was consulted on, but essentially they're waiting to see what happens in the US. We're waiting, and so we'll see. I heard that it was going to be finalized this fall. Unless I've missed something, it hasn't been yet. So
We rely on Gowlings to tell
you
us.
rely on us.
I'm going to say no.
You rely on us. It hasn't happened yet. But what we do say to our clients is that you have to be aware of all of these standards now, because of the way. So I am by trade essentially an environmental lawyer. We talk about the future data is going to be compared against a base year. So you want to make sure that you're collecting your data, that you understand what data to collect, that you're collecting it so that you're ready for when you need to have a base year in order to compare all future data. So legislation coming down the road. We foresee that in the future, that as the standards become mandatory, that we'll see more litigation. As people have to report, we're going to see more litigation related to that. We also might see a reduction of certain kinds of litigation, because once standards are mandatory and people know what the standards are going to be, then it's something that you know what you have to meet. And this is particularly true. You've probably heard a lot in the last couple of years about greenwashing litigation. In Canada, I haven't seen much in the construction area, but there's been a lot of investigations by in Canada with respect to greenwashing. Very significant in the news, actually significant payouts. I think that everybody is hoping for these mandatory standards so that they know what the standards are they have to meet. So in litigation in the construction sector related to, in particular, climate change, and when it comes to ESG, we think about litigation risk. And so we've talked about it a little bit tonight, but about disputes around construction delays related to abnormal weather, for example, supply chain disruptions. We've seen that all. We've seen litigation around insurance coverage and extreme weather events like fires and floods. But there's 3 cases I wanted to bring to your attention, because in ESG litigation, we look abroad. We look at what's happening in Europe. We look at what's happening in the States. 3 interesting things to keep aware of in the construction sector. There's litigation involving new and relatively untested technologies in the renewable space. So we're exploring different spaces, but there is a case in the UK from 2017, MT, Hashguard, and E.ON, where there was a claim because there was an improper calculation related to an international standard for the design of offshore wind turbines. This resulted in a 26 million euro cost for remedial works. So there's litigation around that. So interesting to follow this. The second area is around misrepresentations or mistakes or failures to take account of climate change related events when designing or constructing buildings. We're seeing more claims like that, particularly internationally. And also we're starting to see strategic climate litigation against the construction industry. Now, strategic climate litigation is something we can talk about afterwards, but it's essentially trying to change behavior. And generally we see that kind of litigation against governments. But there's an interesting case that was filed by a group of Indonesian islanders against a Swiss-based major buildings materials company called Holcim before a court in Switzerland. So Indonesian islanders bringing a claim in Switzerland, and they argued that Holcim should be held responsible for its contribution to climate change. And they got a report, a scientific study that attributes to Holcim 0.42% of all global industrial CO2 emissions since year 1750. So that case is working its way through the courts. Interesting, they applied for a number of different types of relief, including damages. They requested that they pay a proportionate share, so 0.42% divided by whatever is attributable to the island. So the share of costs for the island to adapt to climate change. And in October, the court granted the plaintiffs their request for free legal aid. So something to watch. That's something that's pretty new. And you can see stakeholders in Canada looking abroad to what's going on and importing these kinds of cases into Canada. So we'll keep an eye on it.
Well, thank you, Jen King. Jennifer, I want to come to you. You had mentioned in your remarks about your investors. So I want to understand better from you is ESG impacting the ability to raise capital? What are some of the key considerations for investors that is taken into account? Are you able to speak to that?
Sure. And I think, in this environment, you can't really divorce ESG considerations from the overall economic conditions that we all find ourselves in. It is hard to raise capital right now. It is hard to convince investors that it's the right time to start new construction right now. So we actually have come out and said we will not be starting new projects in 2024. We will deliver everything that's in process on time and on budget, but new projects are on pause for the moment. So when you think about raising capital, there's a couple of really creative things I think you can do. And it's important to leverage the time we're in, because our founder, Ed Sunshine, always says, never let a crisis become the waste of a good opportunity. He says it more eloquently than that. But effectively, when you're in terrible times, there's always opportunities. So what we are doing is taking a bit of a pause on the development activity, but really leveraging the expertise we have within our development group on the sustainability side to look at new technologies we will be incorporating when we do start our new projects. We look at every single acquisition and disposition now as it actually pertains to the impact on our overall emissions platform, because we'll be reporting those as part of our science-based target emissions. And some of the really creative products that are on the market right now include green bonds. RioCan was the first company in Canada to actually issue a green bond back in 2021, where we raised $300 million and used a green bond framework, which means that you agreed to allocate the funds raised towards green-based initiatives. And those have to be certified by a third-party company, which they did. You get about a 0.5 percentage point off of your bond rate if you go along with that, because you're reducing emissions. So the investors like that. There's also sustainability-linked loans, which we're certainly pursuing. And those are more linked in terms of affordable housing projects that we consider. We certainly put in some affordable units into most of our new projects anyway. But there are some really interesting vehicles if you are looking to raise capital that tie back to the ESG strategy overall. And those are a couple of examples.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Jordan tells me that we are running out of time. We have 5 minutes according to him. But I want to ask Lauren the next question of you. And it's going to be the same question for everybody. What is one thing you would want people to know about the impact and relevance of ESG? Like, what is one thing you wanted to walk away with today in 2023 and beyond?
I think that it's something that is really progressing from what was previously, and I guess it does reflect a little bit of what investors had been asking for and are currently asking for, from something that was more of a box checking exercise, target setting exercise, to starting to see a little bit more action. So developing plans, integrating ESG considerations into overall company strategies. And we're seeing this all along the supply chain. As I touched on earlier, there's some very exciting and interesting advancements in the procurement of materials, whether it be concrete, whether it be the production of steel, all the way to the equipment that we're using on our sites, the incorporation of alternative fuels, biodiesels, renewable diesels. There's actual action that's going to be coming into play in order for us to actually reach these goals and these targets that we're setting. And I think that's something that we can generally assume across the entire industry, is that we're going to be seeing that really develop over the next few years and actual action be taking place.
Well, thank you, Lauren. Jennifer, what about you?
Thank you. I would say two things. First is obviously transparency becomes increasingly important. So being able to stand up and say what your policies are, how they apply, and when people have actually fallen offside of them is important, because you need to earn the trust and the respect of your stakeholders that way. Secondly, because I'm in my 40s now, I can't remember what secondly was, but there was a second point that was really, really relevant to this. Anyway, so I'll go with transparency and the fact that I think it's obviously with integrated reporting an ongoing journey, and not to take your eye off that ball even during difficult economic times, because it will swing back to have more of a focus on the environmental, social, and governance issues.
Thank you, Jennifer. I'm going to go to Jen King, but if you remember point 2, I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Jen King, over to you.
All right,
One
so
thing.
one thing.
Only one thing.
In a couple of parts. So don't wait. So I think it's really important whether or not there are any of these standards that we've talked about today that apply to you. Don't wait, because the mandatory requirements are coming. So look at what the requirements are. If the federal procurement policy, check to see what they're requiring for these over $10 million procurements, and see what you have to start to gather right now, the information that you need to gather, and track it. Make sure you're keeping track of it. And the best way to do this is to make sure that ESG is really embedded in your leadership structure, which we've heard a lot of good things about from Jennifer. So get involved, get ahead of the curve, and take the opportunities that you can to be involved in the development of regulation that's relevant to your sector. The NRC has a construction research center that's doing a lot of work and developing regulations and guidelines. Look at what they're doing, get involved, and get ahead of the curve.
Thank you. Jennifer, you good? So I asked them for one thing each. So I think if I conclude, it's Jennifer said transparency, Lauren said more than a check mark on a box, and don't wait. So with that, those are all my questions. Oh, we're having a 5-minute break after this, so we can, but are there any questions? Jordan, are there any questions online? We covered it all. That's amazing. All right, thank you, everybody. Pardon? Oh, we'll take. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Jen King.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm glad we were able to take the break. We had the reason for the impromptu 5-minute break was we needed to get the mics working because we have 4 panelists plus myself as moderator. So my name is Jordan Crone. I'm actually a partner from the Calgary office. I flew in just to be a panelist as part of this. So I want to thank Gowlings for flying me to Toronto for today. It's a great treat to be in Toronto. It's a beautiful city despite the snow outside currently. So let's get to our panel. At the far end, we have Gretel Best. So Gretel is actually, she's also from Gowlings. She is a senior law clerk and manager of the litigation and support and e-discovery team here at Gowlings. She focuses primarily on large corporate commercial litigation matters, particularly in the electronic discovery. She has forensic electronic document preservation, collection, and review of all of those documents. She's a relativity certified administrator, an ACEDS certified e-discovery specialist, and holds an Osgood Hall law certificate in e-discovery, records management, information governance, and privacy. So as you can see, she's going to be very important as part of our technology panel here today. Then we have Chris Larkin from Secretariat. Chris Larkin is the Managing Director in Secretariat's Construction Advisory and Dispute Resolution team here in Toronto. He has more than 30 years of experience in the construction industry, which includes 25 years of specializing in construction dispute resolution. Chris is regarded as one of the leading construction delay experts in Canada. He has worked on cases in Ontario, cases with me in Alberta, BC, Quebec, and elsewhere. Next, we have Jacob D'Souza from Atkins Realis. Jacob is a senior advisor for external communications in Canada for Atkins Realis. Jacob's experience spans the industries of management consulting, public sector, retail banking, capital markets, and not-for-profit, as well as practices of investor relations, corporate governance, ESG, strategic communications, public policy, regulatory compliance, and client management. And then we have Doug Heitzman as well, who's from the Blockchain Research Institute. Doug is a chief catalyst at the Blockchain Research Institute. Doug works with clients around the world to help them with their blockchain journeys. He has spent his career focused on disruptive technology and its impact on strategy, organizational models, and business configurations. He's been an entrepreneur founder, COO, and strategy executive. Prior to this, he was at IBM for 25 years, mostly as a headquarters worldwide strategy executive. So with that, let's get into our panel discussion. And I think I'd like to put a broad thesis to the panel and to all those in attendance as well. And my broad thesis that I kind of want to talk about today is that construction has never been more complex and difficult to manage. And I think part of the reason for this is technology. But in the same way, I think technology can help us navigate this and resolve these complexities. So if construction has never been more complex, how are we going to deal with this, right? Do we need to deal with this right now? Is it something that we can continue to let grow and become more and more complex? Or is now the time to start utilizing various technologies, the creation of technologies to reduce the complexity? So, of course, as everyone knows, and as many of us on the call are familiar with, there's a lot of challenges in construction that we see. So some of the key challenges that I think we'll talk about today and that people face are poor performance, poor planning, forecasting, and budgeting. Labor management and labor period has been a hot button topic. Cost overruns, material shortages, and rising cost. Inadequate risk management, haphazard document management. I'm sure Greta will talk about that. And managing it all once a dispute actually starts. So let's talk a little bit then about my thesis that construction has never been more complex and maybe technology is the fault and way out. Jacob, did you want to start with any thoughts on that?
I'll just correct my name, Johan.
Johan, sorry, Johan. Go ahead.
Let's start off. Do we think that construction is more complicated than it was 50 years ago? I don't think that construction is necessarily more complicated than it was 50 years ago. I mean, we built the Hoover Dam in the US, and not to say that it wasn't a completely successful project, but we've done large, complex projects before. I just think what's happened is we've got more information that we have to deal with. We've got more urban infrastructure that we have to deal with, and we've got a lot of information that we have to work with across a number of stakeholders. And so we can use technology to help us bring all of that data together in a collaborative platform. And as long as all of us buy into that, I'm going to quote somebody that put out an article. The CEO of Bruce Power said, if you plan simply and if you purchase simply and then you start building, you'll be the most successful construction business in the industry today. And I think we don't plan enough. We don't spend enough time to really understand the challenges that we have when it comes to the construction world. And so we try and fast track a huge amount of work where if anyone of us in this room or on the panel, if you were to build your house, what would you want to do? You'd want to finish designing it, see what it looks like, understand the cost that's involved with it, and only then purchase and plan and do the construction side.
Doug, I know you recently built a house and you've had a number of fun challenges as it relates to that, but maybe do you have some thoughts on sort of building on Johan's thoughts as it relates to these new challenges with technology?
Yeah, well, I'm actually not entirely comfortable with your framing of your thesis because, yes, complexity is bad because it makes it more difficult for us to assess risk and thus to plan and to raise capital and do all that kind of stuff. But we always had the complexity there. We just didn't have access to it. Technology's allowed us to have access to the complexity that's just inherent in the world. And it allows us to understand and appreciate and incorporate all the externalities that just existed before. The real key for technology is its maturity, that we actually end up being able to abstract a lot of that complexity. But a lot of us, take for granted the fact that there's an electrical outlet on the wall over here because we can plug stuff into it and magic happens. But behind the scenes, behind that abstraction, there's a vast amount of complexity. And so what I think is happening in the construction industry is that, and by the way, for many, many industries of which I work with, is that there is a coalescence of a group of technologies that are maturing and are force multiplying, and they're going to give us extraordinary access to some abstraction of that complexity, which should give us some tools that we've never had access to before. So I'm really excited. I don't think there's a lot of merit in kind of blaming technology for the complexity of our world. I think we really would be more constructive to focus on how technology is how technology is abstracting the complexity of the real world, and what can we do with that?
Yeah, I really like that sort of shift of my thesis, but I'm still going to commit to my thesis for a few more questions. Gretel, I think, Doug set you up really nicely with the notion of what you're doing here with all of that data, all of that sort of, once a dispute happens, just to put it in context, there's a lot of information in a construction dispute. I mean, we can be talking, even on a simple matter, millions of documents. So what technologies are we utilizing that help us extract that data and really sort of understand what's happening behind the scenes on a construction project? Gretel, you're going to have to put the mic closer to you or make sure it's on. No, we cannot. We're going to just trade mics. And mics will be a theme, I guess. Technology and mics.
Better?
Much better.
Oh, better. I can hear myself. Sorry. So again, a lot of data. You guys are now seeing. Here's and the challenge with the data is very much it really helps us.
Yeah, and I think that sort of leads to a question for you, Chris, which is we get this database and all of these sort of, the management of all of these documents and, there's volumes of them. So how do you utilize that, those documents and that management, that database to sort of assist you in your practice dealing with construction disputes and analyzing them? So how are you tackling that, that mountain of, millions of documents?
Jordan, could I throw you a curveball and go back to your original thesis?
Please, please.
There's something on with you, and I disagree with one of your points, but I also agree with another one. I do tend to think construction projects have got more complex. You compare what's being built today to what was built 100 years ago, and you look at the designs. There's been advances in the use of materials, the design of structures. We're able to design and build much more complex structures. We have data systems that we have to incorporate into buildings. Safety standards have changed. So I think construction is a lot more complex. But then, and coming on to your point, that there's not enough planning, I agree there. And from my perspective, involved in construction disputes, I see that as a cause of disputes. You have these more complex projects, and yet there's still not enough time being allowed to properly plan the design, plan the construction, think about construction considerations, logistics, supply chains. And until there's a sort of a recognition of that, more time allowed to that, I think tech will play a role, but it's not going to completely solve the problems we face.
Yeah, I agree. Johan, did you want to reply or follow that notion about sort of the planning going into the technology and sort of what sort of technologies you are utilizing as part of the planning to sort of build these more complex projects?
That's a great setup. So there's a lot of technologies that you can use, but I think we have to define some of the requirements that we're trying to aim for, right? We had a great panel on the environmental impact. So one of those would be something that Atkins Realis has been working on called Decarbonomics. And it's a platform where we can take our designs and we can understand the entire carbon life cycle throughout the construction sequence, but also understand the impact to the environment and take existing buildings and infrastructure and understand what the impact is from that side. Using BIM as a technology, but its implementation in terms of understanding what your design looks like, how that will be constructed, how it will be costed out over time. We've seen a number of times some of these projects take almost a decade to get from design conceptual all the way into operations, and being able to block off and understand the impacts socioeconomical throughout the entire project lifecycle is a huge benefit to ourselves, the entire supply chain. So taking advantage of something like ISO 19650, and I just heard, sifting through document numbers and practices, if as a province or as a country, we adopt ISO 19650, as we've seen in other countries, it'll allow us to start looking at a standardized way of doing projects, not just from a document management, document numbering perspective, but other aspects of our design life cycle, to make sure that if I'm working in Vancouver or Ontario or Quebec, that we can basically jump from one project, from one province to another province and have a very collaborative experience.
Yeah, I think that sort of, new predictive modeling and predictive, understanding things more as projects before they even start is always fascinating. And I think it leads to a bit of discussion about AI, which is always an interesting topic. And I know, Gretel, you wanted to chat a little bit about AI in the document management notion and sort of the future of how AI may be involved with that element. And Doug, I would invite you as well to comment on sort of any notions that you may have about that sort of, the increasing use of AI as we see it on a number of projects.
Thanks, Jordan. So AI is really exciting right now. Obviously, everybody I'm sure has heard of it, but there's a lot of exciting things happening with AI in construction. One of the things, or a lot of the things that I'm seeing really have a lot to do with computer vision and AI. So there are now tools that can actually look at a site and monitor the development of a building, for example, and see how much it's increasing per day, and use that information to understand, is it on schedule? Is it delayed? They're using computer vision to monitor PPE, to make sure that workers are actually using the PPE and they're actually wearing it. They're monitoring sites to make sure that equipment is being put away properly. So AI is doing a lot of that. There's also a lot of AI in agriculture. There's AI drones that are now spreading herbicides more accurately, and then rather than just spreading herbicides across an entire field, they're doing it, they're targeting it. So there's a lot of industries that are using artificial intelligence. We're also seeing AI being incorporated into our litigation support tools. So we've always used artificial intelligence to some degree in the past. So we don't ever review documents document by document anymore. Our volumes of data are now in the millions of records. There's no way that anybody can sit there and review document by document. So we've used AI to review those documents, but we're now using generative AI to actually query our databases to say, okay, show me a document that talks about this issue between these people in natural language, and it's actually returning results for us. In the past, we used to have to query with Boolean searching to find documents, which is archaic, which is now archaic. It was archaic not even 5 years ago, but now with generative AI, you can just ask a question. So that's the kind of things we're seeing, and it's happening really, really quickly. As everyone knows, ChatGPT just came out in November of 2022, right? It's been a year, it's been 12 months, and it's done so much. So we're seeing it now getting incorporated in all of our tools. So it's really exciting. Still very new. We don't put any client data in it, but it's a really interesting space. Yes.
So there's a follow-up question from the group, which Sahil is shouting at everybody, which they probably can't hear. He's just curious how you train the model in those instances.
And Sahil, that's a really good question. Sahil and I have worked on several projects over the last few months. Ask me 5 years ago, and I would tell you that we very rarely used AI on our reviews. We use AI now almost on every database, even the smallest ones of 1,000 documents, because we don't want to spend the time looking at every document one by one. And Sahil's question, how do we train the model? It takes a lot of consistency. So if you have one person, that's ideal, because that one person will be very consistent in their review. The bigger the team, the more inconsistency you're going to have. And that means the model is not going to understand what is responsive and what is not responsive. So it's a really fine line of getting the right team, getting the right training, getting the consistency. And we're seeing our models stabilize. So when I say stabilized, it means the reporting is telling us that it has a good understanding of what's responsive. And the margin of error is low and the confidence is high. We're seeing that now in days, whereas it used to take months. So we're getting better. We're getting better at it. But there's a lot to improve, and the AI is improving as well. So it's not just the human aspect, the tools are getting better. So that's what we're seeing. That's what we're doing. Very exciting. And it does apply well to construction because you guys have a lot of data. And there's a lot of ways for us to parse through it so that we're not spending a lot of money and time doing it.
Yeah, the generative AI space is only a small fraction of the AI landscape. And there's, this is part of a much bigger picture. As it's been previously been said, the fundamental issue in the construction industry is data. Right? If we lack awareness of what's going on, whether it's in our supply chain, whether it's the site dynamics and the resources on site or the personnel on site, or the training and skill capabilities of the personnel or the contract conditions or the financing conditions, all these are data points. And in a world where we can start measuring things a lot, and we have devices out there, machines, et cetera, that have IoT devices that are network connected, that are constantly assessing their state and communicating that state to the network, and we can ingest that. I was working with a company last week in Ottawa that puts geofences around construction sites and uses cell phones so that you can figure out exactly who's on site and when they're on site for how long and what the mix is to make sure that things are working. And that's true of both people and of things and devices and even inventories of materials. And so all these various different things are data points, and we're getting really good and better every day at collecting that data. The second issue is, how do you ledger that data? How do you put it into what we call a state engine, which is a database that multiple people can get access to? Because as soon as we can do that, something magic happens. It's kind of like when you're driving down the highway right now. It used to be, until relatively recently, that most of the information you had were the brake lights or signal lights of the car in front of you and some rough signage on the side of the road. And you use this input to make certain kinds of decisions. But when you've got a system like Waze that can take a holistic view and understand dynamics that are hundreds of miles away from you, as well as the historical patterns about what happens at this time of day under these conditions, and knows about traffic jams or construction or whatever, you can not only get a much better picture, but the system itself can make recommendations about what route to take, right? That is an intelligence that is based on its awareness of this holistic data set that an individual can't have access to. That's pretty revolutionary. I've been working with a company in New York who uses AI to do site prospecting analysis, right? They've got all the data about where utilities are running and how often there's blackouts and where there's schools and what kind of traffic patterns there are that would allow materials to get to site and what the insurance rates are and what the water rates are and all this kind of stuff. And depending on what kind of building and what kind of business you want to build, it can give you advice about what the risk profile is of any given particular site. So one of the most important things that AI is going to give us is this ability to ingest vast amounts of this data that we're now collecting and to be able to create predictions and give advice and assess risk based on vast, vast amounts of data points, both real live data points as well as historical data points. That's kind of, how this is really revolutionary on the scene in the space. So, I think that this idea that, risk assessment is part of the decision-making process of everything, especially in this industry, that AI will play an unbelievably important role. In many situations, it may be invisible to us, just the way that our analogy with the electric outlet there, so much of what goes behind the scenes is invisible, that as we're engaging in any number of transactions, whether it's interacting with personnel or it's hiring people or it's getting access to materials in a supply chain or it's interacting with architecture, whatever, every single one of those transactions arbitrated by systems that are inherently intelligent will allow that intelligence to become part of that transactional dialogue, making real-time continuous recommendations about how to optimize systems and how to mitigate and minimize risk.
Johan, I see you have the mic. Did you want to add anything to that? Or the notion of how you are sort of utilizing or you envision AI being sort of involved with what you're doing?
So, good. It's odd that we all think that AI came around about a year ago. It's a notion that I think we need to debunk a little bit. AI has been around, or modern machine learning has been around for almost 10 years. So it's a technology that's matured, but it's gotten to a point where the more general populace can take advantage of it. So it's important to note that AI is not what we really say it is. It's machine learning. What we're all using at the moment is a subset of what AI actually is. That's the first one. The second one to be very aware of, AI has got pitfalls, and machine learning has got a number of pitfalls. So you were saying earlier that you've had to train a model, be very diligent, careful what you feed it. And I'm in a lawyer's office, so the best place to quote a case that was publicized a couple of months ago, almost a year ago. There was case law in the US. A lawyer went and used ChatGPT to prepare his casework, understanding that the system has been trained on millions of records on the internet up until 2021, roughly. And when he presented his case, one of his case studies to the judge, they had to go and do some investigation. They found that the case was fabricated. So AI is an extremely powerful tool, but we have to know, just like any other tool in the world, how to use it properly and effectively, feeding it the right type of information for us to get the best insights out of it, to take advantage of what was said earlier, to help us speed up work that was traditionally, that would take a long time, but utilize the tool for what it's built for. Don't just assume that it'll give you the right answer.
I just have one comment. And the one challenge I find with using AI to analyze construction data, you have a lot of drawings. And AI does not like, it needs words to figure out if a document is responsive. Although there is computer vision now where it can actually see a document. There's AI now that is telling you what a picture actually is, which is kind of nice. So we don't have to look for it.
Actually, I got to take some issue with that because I'm sorry, right now we've already got systems and we've had them for, as you point out, 10, 15 years now that outperform 99% of all radiologists, right? We've got some amazingly good technology that are way better than humans at understanding images because they have access to way more experience than humans do.
And there's been studies that technology, so AI doc review, is more accurate than human review. And that's just true. Humans are very inconsistent It depends if you're tired, if you're reviewing documents late at night, it's not going to be the same decision as if it was you're fresh in the morning. So that's one great thing. But there are hallucinations, there are biases in these models, these AI models. So there's always something to think about and to be wary of. Human in the loop. Yeah, it's a good term.
Chris, I see you want to add something, so please do. Especially, I'd love to hear sort of more with your experience in disputes and sort of dealing with that notion as well.
Thanks, Jordan. So, it's like specifically to disputes, I've been working in construction disputes for about 25 years, and tech has certainly increased the volume of information that we had to look at, review, and analyze in that time. So when I first started, everything was paper. Now all communications, it's uncontrolled amounts of emails that are being sent. There's vast amounts of project progress photographs, video, drone footage that's available. And I think the current state of where we're at, we're not quite at that point that Doug described, where we've got the technology, AI technology, to really help us analyze that information. But like regrettably mentioned, I'm hopeful it's going to get there soon. I mean, certainly with the document review, I see that as the first area there where it's going to help experts and lawyers review documents. Another area is the computer visioning that you mentioned, just the ability to say, look at time-lapse photograph, identify when people were performing particular tasks, the plant and equipment that was being used, drops in productivity for particular reasons. So I think AI is going to play a huge role in analyzing construction disputes. And I think we're about to see a leap forward in that, but not quite yet.
Sorry, this is a really, really interesting area because so much, I think, is going to be changing. First of all, with the advent of technology like smart contracts, right, where a lot of what is done typically after the fact as conflict resolution or conflict arbitration or judgment happens before the fact, because the various different conditions about what happens when things happen are encoded in code, and it's immutable and it just happens automatically. The related part of that story has to do with the ability to create hedges against risk, right? So, I mean, Aon right now in the UK has a system where if I drive to the airport and on my way to the airport, I'm in the, hopefully I'm not driving, or maybe I'm doing this while I'm talking. I'm worried I'm going to be late for a meeting. And so I buy travel insurance to mitigate against that. And some engine in the background is doing analysis that says that what's the risk of that. And so I go to the airport and it gives me, for a $35 premium, I get $1,000 worth of travel insurance. As soon as I park my car knows that it's parked at the airport, and it knows that the risk profile on my car has automatically decreased because it's in a parking lot and it's going to be there for 2 weeks while I'm in the UK. And it can take the insurance I was paying to mitigate the risk against my car and put it on my health travel insurance and kind of move it in a way that's optimized to my benefit. When I show up late at my meeting because my airline actually arrived 3 hours late, there aren't people involved or lawyers involved. There's a smart contract that simply looks at the Oracle and says, yes, the conditions of this contract were not made, and transfer the money to my account to compensate me for the hedge position that I took. And so I think that kind of model, it's called parametric insurance, that there are just things that measure the conditions and then create the resolution for the dispute, or the resolution of, in this particular case, an insurance contract, that inherently start to atomize the ability to hedge against risk. And if we're getting systems that understand risk, because they have this ability to look at systems much more holistically, and we've got smart contracts that can establish the conditions of how we're going to react to risk under different situations, and we've got the tooling that allows us to measure whether or not certain conditions have or have not come into existence, and the system can self-adjust and self-insure and self-hedge itself. Now, I know this is utopian, but some version of this world is already manifesting in pockets around the world. And what I think is super interesting is how the legal profession responds to the automation of the arbitration of conflict and the incorporation of risk into decision making, because that whole substrate is changing.
I couldn't agree more. But unfortunately, our time is nearing the end, which,
by the way, the part you haven't even talked about yet, that no one here has talked about yet, is what's changing with capitalization and ownership. Because one of the huge breakthroughs is, and this is, I know, a complete bomb throwing into the room, but we're going to be fractionalizing ownership in a way that we've never seen before, right? Digital assets are allowing people to start investing as individuals and pooling their resources and creating, autonomous organizations that are going to be providing vast capital sources into the construction industry that we've never, ever seen before. And figuring out how to deal with that whole legal framework around what that means, and that any revenue coming from a property can automatically be distributed to the respective token holders of that fractionalized ownership. This is a whole area you haven't even touched on yet.
And I wish I could. So I'm going to make that your closing thoughts. Johan, do you have any closing thoughts that you want to make to the panel about sort of what we've chatted about today, or about any loops you want to close out before we finalize our presentation today?
That's a great question, Jordan. So we talked about contracting models earlier. And I think, from a technology adoption, innovation perspective, lowest bid is not the best one always, right? That is not the answer that we need to aim for. We need to answer the question of what will get us the highest value. How can we address the challenges of the market that we have today? And how can we adopt these technologies where it benefits not just the organizations and teams that work with them, but the end client at the end of the day to get the best value?
Yeah, I love that thought. And I see a lot of head shaking yes in this room. So I think that's a great final thought. Chris, do you have any final thoughts that you just sort of want to give to us about sort of anything we've discussed today?
Yeah, sort of just building on what Johan just said. I think sort of historically, construction has been quite slow to adopt technology. I think we're at a point where that is going to change. I think consultants, contractors, if they don't adopt technology, improve productivity, become more efficient, mitigate risk better from planning, they'll be out of business. They'll be overtaken by those that do. So I think we're at a point now where these companies really should be looking at the adoption of tech and the benefits that can be gained from it.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I also love that follows my thesis about technology being the way out of the complexity. So fantastic. Gretel, do you have any last sort of thoughts that you want to give? Maybe something that follows my thesis again, because that would be great.
I was actually going to agree with your thesis, Jordan. And I very much agree with Chris and Johan. I think technology is causing a lot of the problems that we're seeing. There's just so much data and trying to rein that in, but I think it's going to help. I think, the more you can understand technology and see how technology can help your business and improve your processes and improve your workflows, I think that's the best way. And having people that understand it. And I always tell the people I work with, you don't have to know everything about the technology and how to use it to like every degree. You can always talk to people who know. So if you don't know, ask somebody or have somebody on your team who knows. But embrace it if you can.
All right. And I think that's going to be my final closing thoughts. So embrace it if you can, as it relates to technology. With that, I'm mindful of everyone's time.
You don't have a choice.
Yeah, you don't have a choice at this age. So I kind of agree with that as well. So yeah, also great point. So with that, I want to thank everyone for attending today. It was an absolute pleasure. I want to thank everyone for attending in person. I want to thank everyone who attended online and virtually as well. It's fantastic that we were able to get together for the 10th annual Construction Fall Law Forum. So it's just fantastic that we've been doing this for 10 years. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for your attendance. I really appreciate it. I'd like to thank everyone on our panel who showed up today and provided. I'd like to thank all the other panels and all of our speakers today. We could not do this without all of you, and it's just great to have everyone. So thanks so much. We have some upcoming webinars I see have been posted. Ted's trying to get me to say additional things, but I can't read lips from this far away. So Mark, why don't you come take this microphone, please? It's for the people online.
Look, hi all. I think Jordan's just about covered it, but I'm Mark Crane, a commercial litigator in the office, focusing on infrastructure. I have to say that was a fascinating panel. I work with Gretel a fair bit, and just listening to your thoughts and divergent thoughts, and Doug, you in particular, just having a view of it, I think is fascinating. You have to wonder where we'll be in a year, having regard to where we've come in the past year, and you have to wonder whether we'll all be standing here in a few years or not, or whether there'll be a drone. But it's a fascinating topic, and as Jordan said, thanks for coming today. This is our 10th year that we've done this, and we try to be practical and timely in the updates that we give and over the years, and hopefully you found that to be the case today. Thank you very much for coming. You know, our practice group, as many of you know, covers the land width from solicitor to disputes in terms of our construction group. It's across the country, and I think, as you noticed from our first panel, it touches jurisdictions across the world. So thank you very much for coming, and not just a thank you to this panel, but to the ESG panel, to Natasha, and to our UK colleagues. All very fascinating and timely stuff. I guess the cocktail reception is next, so please stick around if you have time to do so. If you have any questions, we'd be pleased to chat with you about it. And Ted has put up a slide. We do have a webinar coming up next week on December 5th in respect of the recent Supreme Court of Canada decision regarding the Sudbury case, and it'll be timely in respect of health and safety matters. And so if that's of interest to you, please consider joining in. We'd be pleased to host that with you. And with that, I think that's it. Thanks very much, Ted, for piecing this together, and thank you once again for coming.